This familiar desk manifests its presence by resisting my pressures and by deflecting light to my eyes. Physical things, generally, however remote, become known to us only through the effects which they help to induce at our sensory surfaces. Yet, our common sense talk of physical things goes forward without benefit of explanations in more intimately sensory terms. Entification begins at arm's length. The points of condensation in our conceptual scheme are things glimpsed, not glimpses. In this, there is little cause for wonder. Each of us learns his language from other people through the observable mouthing of words under conspicuously intersubjective circumstances, linguistically and hence conceptually. The things in sharpest focus are the things that are public enough to be talked of publicly, common and conspicuous enough to be talked of often. Just as one sees his nose best in a mirror, so also he best identifies his sense data by reflecting them in external objects. Impressed with the fact that we know external things only mediately through our senses, philosophers from Berkeley onward have undertaken to strip away the physicalistic conjectures and bear the sense data. Yet even as we try to recapture the data in all their innocence of interpretation, we find ourselves depending upon sidelong glances into natural science. Is itself based on our general knowledge of the ways of physical objects, illuminated desks, reflected light, activated retinas. Small wonder that the quest for sense data should be guided by the same sort of knowledge that prompts it. Aware of these points, our philosopher may still try, in a spirit of rational reconstruction, to abstract out a pure stream of sense experience. References to physical things are largely what hold it together. These references are not just inessential vestiges of the intersubjective character of language, and a memory trace of a sense datum is too meager an affair to do much good. Actual memories are mostly traces not of past sensations, but of past conceptualization or verbalization. There is every reason to inquire into the sensory background of ordinary talk of physical things. The mistake comes only in seeking an implicit subbasement of conceptualization or language. Conceptualization on any considerable scale is inseparable from language. It will be by clarifying the connections between ordinary talk of physical things and various further matters, which in turn we grasp with its help. On the face of it, there is a certain verbal perversity in the idea that ordinary talk of familiar physical things is not in large part understood as it stands, or that the familiar physical things are not real, or that evidence for their reality needs to be uncovered. For surely the key words understood, real, and evidence are too ill defined to stand up under such punishment. We would only be depriving them of the very denotations to which they mainly owe such sense as they make to us. It was a lexicographer, Dr. Johnson, who demonstrated the reality of a stone by kicking it. And to begin with, we have little better to go on than Johnsonian usage. The familiar material objects may not be all that is real, but they are admirable examples. There are, however, philosophers who overdo this line of thought, treating ordinary language as sacrosanct. They exalt ordinary language to the exclusion of one of its own traits, its disposition to keep on evolving. Scientific neologism is itself just linguistic evolution gone self-conscious. As science is self-conscious common sense. And philosophy, in turn, as an effort to get clearer on things, is not to be distinguished in purpose and method from good and bad science. One could even end up finding that the smoothest account of the world does not, after all, accord existence to ordinary physical things. Our boat stays afloat because at each alteration we keep the bulk of it intact as a going concern. Our words continue to make sense because of continuity of change of theory. We warp usage gradually enough to avoid rupture. We are limited in how we can start, even if not in where we may end up. To vary Neurath's figure with Wittgenstein's, we may kick away our ladder only after we have climbed it. So the proposition that external things are ultimately to be known only through their action on our bodies should be taken as one among various truths about initially unquestioned physical things. It qualifies the empirical meaning of our talk of physical things while not questioning the reference. No, inquiry is possible without some conceptual scheme, so we may as well retain and use the best one we know. Right down to the latest detail of quantum mechanics. Analyze theory, building how we will. We all must start in the middle. Ouch is a one-word sentence. A man may volunteer from time to time as a laconic comment on the passing show. The correct occasions of its use are those attended by painful stimulation. Such use of the word, like the correct use of language generally, is inculcated in the individual by social training. And society achieves this despite not sharing the individual's pain. Society's method is rewarding the utterance of ouch when the speaker shows further evidence of discomfort, like a wince, or is actually seen to suffer violence, and penalizing it when the speaker is visibly untouched. For the man who has learned his lesson. Some stimuli for ouch may be public blows. In response, even to socially undetectable stimulations. The trick has depended on prior links between covert stimulation and overt behavior. Notably, the wincing instinct. We can imagine a primitive use of red as a one-word sentence on a par with ouch. Just as ouch is for painful stimulation. Red is for those distinctive photochemical effects wrought in one's retina by red light. This time, society's training consists in rewarding the utterance of red when the individual is seen looking at something red and penalizing it otherwise. The critic, society's agent, approves the subject's utterance of red by observing the subject and his viewed object and finding the latter red. In part, therefore, the critic's cue is red irradiation of his own retina. A partial symmetry obtains between the subject's cue and the critic's cue for red, which was lacking in the case of ouch. This partial symmetry suggests a sense in which ouch may be called more subjective than red, and red more objective than ouch. In the case of red, typically one's mentor or critic also sees red. In the case of ouch, typically he does not get hurt. Ouch is not independent of social training. One has only to prick a foreigner to appreciate that it is an English word. But in its subjectivity, it is unusual. Its survival value is as a distress signal, and it is of only marginal linguistic status, being incapable of integration into longer sentences. Association of square with just the situations in which the retinal projection is square would be simpler to learn, but the more objective usage is, by its very intersubjectivity, what we are exposed to and encouraged in. In general, if a term is to be learned by induction from observed instances, the instances have to resemble one another in two ways. They have to be enough alike from the learner's point of view to afford a basis of similarity, and they have to be enough alike from simultaneous, distinct points of view to enable the teacher and learner to share the appropriate occasions. A term restricted to squares normal to the line of sight would meet the first requirement only. A term applying to physical squares in all their scale projections meets both. This is the way with terms for observable physical objects generally. And thus, it is that such objects are focal to reference and thought. Red, unlike square, is a happy case where a nearly uniform stimulatory condition of connections between words and experience. Uniformity comes where it matters socially. Hence, in point of subjectively conspicuous circumstances of utterance, rather than in point of privately conspicuous ones. For an extreme illustration, consider two men, one with normal color vision, the other colorblind, as between red and green. But the private mechanisms by which they achieve these similar results are very different. The one man has learned red in association with the standard photochemical effect, trimmed and trained to take the shape of identical elephants. The anatomical details of twigs and branches will fulfill the elephantine form differently from bush to bush, but the overall outward results are alike.